Mr. Cowing, behind you, I have up People's Exhibit 340. You discussed a little bit the leather couch. May I have permission to approach?
You may.
I know this gets a little confusing because 340 is how the living room appeared on March 29th, 2012, right? Is that actually March, November, 29th, 2012? And it looks different in August of 2013 when you were there. But the point, and what was discussed a bit on direct, is that it was this couch, the one that's against the north wall, that was moved. You got in there by August 2015, right?
Yes.
And it moved this wall here where the television was, right?
Correct.
And you were either present to observe or Ms. Corcoran told you that the dog alerted to a blue line from the couch to the left wall.
Correct.
So then these other locations in the room where there was blood that was positive in the lab, dog didn't alert to any of those locations, right?
Correct.
It would be okay to take that down if you please, counsel, or leave it, either's fine. By March of 2013, you were making no secret of the fact that Mr. Redwine was a suspect, the suspect. Is that fair?
Yes.
And in March of 2013, you were telling him you would have him prosecuted, right?
Yes.
Not relevant, and it's beyond scope. Mr. Moran?
Your Honor, the relevance here is just to inform why a citizen might have been reluctant to converse with this law enforcement official who's been telling him that he'll be prosecuted and that he was a suspect. It goes to...
I agree. I think you're good.
In the same vein, and I'm not suggesting this was you or law enforcement, but you did become aware that Mr. Redwine was getting death threats, right?
Yes.
And he, at one point, you in fact called one individual to tell him to knock it off.
Correct.
And that was somebody who was posting online about his fantasies of killing Mr. Redwine.
Correct.
There was discussion on direct about that. Pardon me if I've messed up the date, but I believe it was June 27th, and that was the day that you personally broke the news to Mr. Redwine that his child's remains had been positively identified. Is that right?
Yes.
And you described that he had an emotional reaction.
Yes.
I believe the word that you chose was that he was weeping.
Yes.
Is sobbing too strong for what you observed?
No.
So suffice to say, strong emotional reaction for the father of this child when you broke the news to him about his son being definitively deceased.
Yes.
When Mr. Redwine was called and he said that he was in Indianapolis and you were telling him that items had been found, there was some discussion on direct examination about his response to you suggesting items had been found, right?
Yes.
And he referred to them both as items and then he named particular items. that right? Shoes, clothing.
He referred to them as articles, and yes, clothing and a shoe.
Thank you for that correction. I recall now as articles. Around the time searching is going on again in June of 2013, there was a vigil, held. Is that right?
Correct.
And then after that vigil, you became aware of people gathering at the Billy Goat Saloon. They were planning to do harm to Mr. Redwine.
Objection, and any more questions after this? It goes beyond the scope.
Any more questions after this on that issue? I think it goes beyond the scope, and this will be the second, maybe the third time, but at least the second time you've established this, and so after this, I want you to be done with it, okay?
So you were aware that a crowd had gathered and was threatening harm to Mr. Redwine?
Yes.
On February 5th, 2014, you participated in the seizure of Mr. Redwine's pickup truck, right?
Correct.
You called Mr. Redwine about it, and he agreed to bring it to you. Is that right?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, this is a little bit of an aside. I wanted to clear something up we talked about before lunch. You mentioned the 41-1, wherein Mr. Redwine needed to come in to, or you were allowed then to take pictures of him, his body, his hands, right?
Correct.
And you called him to inform him of that 41-1. He agreed to come and meet with you.
He did.
So you didn't have to chase him down and do anything like that, right?
Yes.
And the same on this February 14th date, when you called him, he was in Farmington, is that right?
February 14th.
I'm sorry, February of 2014, February 5th, 2014, when you seized the Dodge.
Correct.
And you knew that he was in Farmington because Investigator Gabbard and Investigator Patterson had set up surveillance on the pickup truck, right?
Correct.
And the Plata County Sheriff's Office personnel were assisted by New Mexico law enforcement agents from San Juan County Sheriff's Office in watching that truck as it was being brought to you.
Objection of relevance and beyond the scope.
Mr. Moran?
Seizure of this truck was discussed by the prosecution in direct, and I just want to establish Mr. Redwine's cooperation because his unwillingness to participate in the efforts to find his son has been raised over and over by the prosecution, and there's evidence to rebut that.
Well, I don't understand why people were watching the truck has anything to do with that, so I'm going to sustain the objection.
On that occasion, when Mr. Redwine provided you the Dodge pickup truck, he did express some frustration because he said he needed to use the truck to get to Texarkana for work.
Objection of relevance.
That one I can see some relevance to.
Is that right?
Yes.
And you were aware that he had driven that truck from Texarkana, Arkansas, before you seized it, right?
Yes.
Was it at that time that the GPS unit had been installed on that truck?
In reference to which date?
February 2014. February 2014.
And repeat that question again.
Let me ask it this way. Did you install a GPS tracking monitor on Mr. Redwine's truck?
I don't recall doing that, no.
You were aware that it had been done?
I don't recall.
On June 22nd, 2013, that's when you were on Middle Mountain participating in a search, right?
Yes,
And you discussed that search on direct examination, agreed?
yes.
And on that day, you there was a bone that you found, is that right?
As a group, we found items, yes.
There's one specifically I'm talking about where the two cadaver dogs that you were with indicated the smell of
Objection, Your
human
Honor.
decomposition.
No,
Relevance,
This search was inquired after on
come here.
direct examination.
Go ahead, Mr. Moran.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, I think I'll leave it there.
All right.
Nothing further.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. So, Investigator Cowan, you were asked about if a report from a different investigator, Mr. Patterson, refreshed your memory about phone service. Do you recall that line of questioning?
Yes,
With regard to that, do you actually yourself from the investigation have knowledge about where Verizon works and where it doesn't?
Yes.
Okay. So two things were referenced, I believe. In the recording, it was specific to Middle Mountain, not the house. Am I accurate?
Yes.
And then also, counsel asked you about the house.
Correct.
Can you tell what your experience is in terms of Verizon service at the house?
My experience as a whole, Verizon works better in that area at that time, and especially at that house.
Is it fair to say that all phone coverage is spotty in Vallecito when we get up in the Middle Mountain area, things like that?
Yes.
Have you witnessed one of your fellow investigators be able to use her Verizon phone at the residence?
Yes.
And then when we're talking about Middle Mountain Road itself, in that recording, were you saying that Verizon works better or AT&T from where you placed the call?
Verizon.
Thank you. I'm going to approach the 507, Your Honor. This is just a map of a search area that I forgot to introduce. It did come up and cross the area itself. That's acceptable to the court.
That's fine.
Basically just laying this as a foundation investigator, but you testified about the search on August 6th and where Karen Corcoran's dog went on that search.
Yes,
Is 507 fair and accurate to that?
it is.
I move to admit 507 in the evidence, Your Honor.
I might just word on it briefly. My impression from your testimony was that Ms. Corcoran was just pointed at the trailhead. Is that, did I misunderstand that?
We had her start from the parking area, and she worked, down towards the slope.
Basically, what I'm getting at is you weren't with them for the entirety of her dog-sniffing search of this recovery area, were you?
No, not the whole time.
Or did you have eyes on the dog sufficient that you can say that this is a fair and accurate representation of where the dog went, or is this just sort of roughly as you understood it through things people were telling you?
I had eyes on initially seeing them go in that direction, and that's about it.
I'm not certain how far it extends or whether this purple blob in the middle is a fair and accurate representation of what was searched.
Correct.
Judge, on that basis, we'll object.
Any response at all?
Just that judge is being offered for the general area, and it's not being proposed as precise. The jury has 520 for GPS coordinates as well.
You know, I'm going to deny so not coming.
I want to talk to you about the iPhone. You remember that line of questioning?
Yes.
Okay. And counsel asked you if, in your life experience, if phones can be broken and then set out to dry. You remember that line of questioning?
Yes.
Did the defendant say he had set his phone out to dry and it was fixed when you talked to him on June 21st?
No.
What did he actually say about it?
He volunteered a statement that the phone is working again.
No, I'm sorry. I'm talking about the first time you talked to him. So let me give you the exact date. June 21st of 2013, when you reached him and he said that he hadn't called you back because the phone had fallen in the sink. Remember that?
Yes.
Did he say if he'd done anything after the phone fell in the sink?
He said he replaced the phone.
Thank you. I want to talk to you about the entry video. You recall that line of questioning?
Yes.
You did have something to do a camera video that day, right?
Yes.
What was the purpose of the entry video?
To show, upon entry, that the condition of the house prior to working the dogs in the house and the condition of the house as we left it. Basically showing that everything is left in its place.
Was that in part based on the defendant's request that you can go in as long as you read everything how you found it?
Yes.
Okay. And then in terms of video, whether it was Officer Corcoran or not on video, did you follow her and Molly around the house everywhere they went during the search?
No.
So you had testified, I think, that you were on the threshold area of the door, right?
Yes.
Did you have any opportunity to follow her with a camera without interfering?
No.
And then I'd like to ask you about the comment, defense counsel said, did you make a specific statement about blood and brains on boots? Do you recall that?
Yes.
And I believe what counsel asked you was, you said something to the effect of, you've stepped in lots of blood and brain. You recall that?
Yes.
Do you know what statement he's referring to?
I do.
When was that statement made?
That was made on June 29th, 2013.
Is that the entire sentence that you said, or just part of the sentence that you said?
Just part.
Do you recall the exact words and sentence that you said on that occasion? And if not, of course, I could refresh your memory.
It would be good to refresh my memory.
Judge, may I approach with page 74 out of 77 related to that transcript referenced by defendant?
Yes. Did they give you enough information, Mr. Brett? I don't think so. Okay.
I'll draw your attention to the sentence that you were asked about, and then I'll draw your attention to the rest of that sentence in the following. So the questions by counsel were related to whether you could have tracked any odor in the house, right?
Yes.
What was the full sentence that you said?
I had discussed with Mark how I have worked other crime scenes. And have come in contact with human biological fluids.
Okay. The sentence itself, do you remember what you said, or do you need the transcript?
Probably needed.
Okay. May I approach one more time, Your Honor?
Yes.
So
At this
just
point,
so,
it's asked and answered.
just so that,
Hold on. No, it hasn't been answered.
Not the way he wants, but it's been answered. This is impeachment now.
I think it's appropriate. Go ahead and you can approach.
so as you refresh your memory, what I'm asking you is specifically, what was the entire sentence in the next sentence, so the jury has the context of the comment about whether you stepped in lots of blood and brain, okay?
Okay.
So keep that in mind as you refresh. Please tell the jury what you said.
Yes. I stated we've worked a lot of crime scenes and I've thrown away a lot of boots.
And in that same sentence that you said, you've thrown away a lot of boots and stepped in lots of blood and brain.
Correct.
Objection, asked and answered, improper impeachment.
You know what? It's in. Let's move on.
What do you actually do with boots when you step in things on a crime scene?
I throw them away, and if they're not too bad, I turn them into autopsy shoes.
Do you go walking around crime scenes in the boots that you've walked in other crime scenes in?
No.
And this statement was actually started about the fact that you throw those boots away.
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions, Judge.
Anything from the jury? Counsel, want to come up? Yeah, thank you. Okay, Lieutenant Cowling, where were you when you placed the call to Mr. Redwine to ask when he planned to return?
I was 6 miles up on Middle Mountain Road at the gravel pit.
Okay. Any follow-up from your side on that?
Just one question, Judge. Was that close to the remain site?
Yes.
But you had to go up to the gravel pit though, huh?
That's where we typically base out of.
Right, because there's a cell signal there, right? In part.
Yes.
And when you're down at the remain site and in the ravine and in that area, cell service is not as good. Fair?
It works for Verizon, yes.
But not for both companies and not as you move about in that area. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Okay, can this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
You're free to go. Next witness?
Thank you, Your Honor.